Cool. So now your question is around auction sales, right? And this is always something that, yeah, it's very contested. People don't quite understand it because we always used to private sales, and then auction sales are a bit of an anomaly, and there's a lot of rules behind it, and there's a lot of practices that people need to know actually before attending these auctions. Now, in this particular instance, a person bought a piece of land. Now, again, as everyone knows, we get these questions at PLA, but we often don't get all the facts to be able to answer the questions as thoroughly or comprehensively as we'd like. But they bought the land on auction. Apparently, it was advertised that the land had water and sewage pipes. But when they bought the land, they realized that there was no flowing water onto the land, and the sewage pipes, obviously, converse, when flowing out. They approached the municipality. The municipality said that they still had to do the connections. However, this has not happened. And apparently now the municipality says they no longer want to do the connections because they don't have the capacity to do so. Now, there's a lot of unanswered questions here. If, for example, whether bulk services were paid, whether there was a requirement to pay bulk services, what the contracts actually did say. But Nick, from your side, if you had to look at this just on the facts of the case, and then maybe play around with those just to look at a number of different options and apply it across the board, yeah, to all our viewers.
Perfect. So let's just talk about auctions in general, just to start with. So obviously, as Bruno pointed out, this is an area of property law where people purchase properties, which is a little bit different to your normal run-of-the-mill individual sales between people, okay? And auctions of properties happen for a number of different reasons. They can happen via consent of a particular party. So what we've experienced, especially in the last couple of years, if someone's struggling to get a price that they want on a particular property, they can put it on auction to try see whether they get a better price through the auction process. But this is not the only process where auctions are utilized. We also use auctions for a number of different processes, such as where someone is perhaps sequestrated, someone is perhaps liquidated. If there is a deceased estate, so someone has died and they have a property which has to be, the funds have to be recuperated for the purposes of the estate. And even circumstances, for instance, where, perhaps there's a dispute between parties who own a particular property, using a auction might be a valid way for them to dispose of a particular property where they can prevent a fight from going on. So there are a number of different ways that this is done. And then there are various parties that conduct the auction. So depending on what process has been used, you can either go through an auction house, an individual auction house which is appointed to conduct the auction in the circumstances, or it can go through the processes of through the services of the sheriff. So the sheriff of the court, who's the agent of the court to conduct its business, can conduct a auction of a particular premises in the circumstances. Now, what's important, depending on who's being used and what they're doing in the circumstances, is checking what the conditions of the sale are. Okay, and this is extremely important. So we get a lot of people in our sphere who are interested in auctions and want to perhaps purchase properties on auction, or even engage in the business of flipping properties, which they will use auctions as their way of dealing with the particular assets. And what you have to be very, very careful of is you have to know what your conditions of sale are when you are entering into any auction. Okay, you have to be very, very careful. And people who understand what they are getting into can generally be very successful, either property purchasers or flippers in the circumstances. And people who don't know what they're getting into, who don't understand the terms and conditions of the sale, can get themselves into serious problems. Okay, so if you are ever going to engage in an auction, please do not skip over the terms and conditions of the sale. If there are no written terms and conditions, I would recommend you don't touch that sale at all. Okay, make sure it's in writing. Make sure you know exactly what's going on. Make sure you read those terms and conditions. It's very important. You need to understand in the terms and conditions, they will set out certain exclusions from liability. Every auctioneer does this, okay? They will exclude their liability for certain things. you need to understand what is happening on that particular property. In particular, where properties are being sold, and there might be occupants of that particular property. And you know, is this property going to be given with vacant occupation, or are they not guaranteeing vacant occupation? This is something critically important for people purchasing properties, because you might find that you purchase that property, you think, fantastic, I've got a new home, but you've got an ex-tenant, and often in bank sales, the ex-owner of the property who has simply decided that they are not going to leave that property. And so you sit in the circumstance where you've now got to incur extensive legal fees to bring an eviction or some other process in the circumstances. So it is critically important you understand what you are getting into when you purchase on a sale. So that being said, if we turn to the question today, as Bruno pointed out, unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of having the agreement in front of us for the purposes of this forum. We haven't had a look through the documentation, but suffice to say, it's very important that if you are going to engage in purchase property, you look out for what exactly the exclusions are, what guarantees are they giving you in respect to the property. In this particular question, we're told that they've advertised as having water and sewer pipes. And unfortunately, as Bruno's alluded to within the starting question, where if there's an assertion that there are sewer and water pipes, that doesn't necessarily mean that those pipes are connected to anything in the circumstances. So you will have to go back and look at your contract to see what exactly they said. It might be the circumstance where there is a breach of contract. So if there is a failure to perform in terms of the contract, it is simple breach of contract like we've dealt with before. You will look through your auctioneer's contract, say, guys, there's a breach. There should be a breach provision within your auctioneer's contract, and you simply utilize what the breach contract says to you. So send them a notice, you guys are in breach because you said this was a representation and it's not, and you select your remedy. So you can cancel, claim back your money, or whatever the case is. If it's not the circumstances, and this is why I have highlighted you need to be very careful, you may also sit in a circumstance where it's not necessarily a breach. So they've said to you, you've got pipes on the property, but they never said to you that it's going to be connected. And in those circumstances, you might be in trouble, because you might be in a circumstance where you've now bought the property and you're going to have to live with the condition that the property's in, because the actual condition was properly expressed to you within the contract. So the obligation is on you. You are the one who's engaging in the auction. You are agreeing to the terms and conditions. And if you bought yourself a lemon, you might have to sit with that lemon. So unfortunately, that's as far as I can go with respect to this particular question. It's just a question of, please, people, if you're going to engage in auctions, okay, it can be a fantastically lucrative business. Both Bruno and I have clients who do very well in this space, but we have also both seen a heartbreak and people coming to us with problems that you absolutely cannot believe. So please be very careful. Read your terms and conditions. Make sure you know what you're doing before you engage in these particular things.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Nick.
Perfect. Thank you, Bruno, and we will see you next week.
Have a good one.